Hello there, people of the internet. Me and a buddy of mine were having a discussion about, well, I feel like this one's going to ruffle some feathers, about the pros and cons between having an automatic firearm and having a manually operated firearm. So whenever we were talking, there were some points that came up that really kind of made me rub my chin and look off to the wayside. And I was like, you know what, that's a good point, and there's enough good points here that pretty much warrant me making a video. So whenever I talk about semi-automatic firearms, we're going to kind of compare apples to apples here. Sort of. We're still comparing apples to oranges, but they're like orange looking apples and some really red oranges. But of course, I'm not going to compare the apples to oranges parts. I'm going to try to compare the apples to apples parts. So whenever it comes to automatic firearms, like something that loads itself from its own magazine whenever you pull that trigger, meaning that whenever you fire your round, it loads the next round into the chamber, a lot of people don't really comprehend how that functions and whatnot. I see a lot of people run these automatic firearms and they'll fire a round and then cycle it anyway, fire a round, cycle it anyway. And then you go and, you go to the range after that FUD has gone and you pick up all the non-spent ammunition that's on the ground, and suddenly you have yourself a bunch of free ammo. Some not your ammo, right? But that's that's a topic for another video, I guess. Whenever we were talking about the benefits of having an automatic firearm, there are definitely a lot of pros to having yourself some sort of automatic system like this right here. This is a Ruger Mini 14. This is a 183 series. Not a whole lot I could say about this rifle. You guys have seen it on the channel before. However, whenever it comes to any kind of automatic platform, more often than not, they're going to have, especially if we're talking about rifle caliber systems, they're going to have some sort of gas system or some sort of delaying system that stops the chamber from opening while pressures are still extremely high inside of that chamber. Whenever you get into rifle caliber cartridges, you can't get away with straight blowback systems like you can with just regular old pistol caliber cartridges. It's a little on the windy side out here today. Pressures inside of that chamber are just too great to be able to rely on straight blowback systems. So as a result, there has to be some sort of locking system built into the rifle. That adds a significant amount of complication and a significant amount of additional moving parts to your rifle. So whenever you add parts to a rifle, that increases chances of things going wrong inside of that rifle. One of the things I like about the AK and how reliable it is there's very, very few moving parts actually inside of that rifle. It is as bare minimum, basic, stupid, simple as an automatic firearm can get. Time you have even the most bare minimum, stupid, basic automatic firearm, they're still going to be significantly more complicated than a manually operated firearm. Like, for example, this bolt action Yugo 2447, an 8mm Mauser. Very, very simple. It would take some really stupid things to get this to where it is not going. Like, the firearm itself would have to take some kind of damage, or the ammunition would have to be faulty. If you're running regular old ammunition inside of this that isn't hand loads, that has ridiculously long bullets or something like that to where it catches on the feed lips or something, I don't know, insert your situation here. If you run just regular ammunition through a rifle like this, then, I mean, there's not much that can go wrong with this. At most, maybe you run some high pressure ammo and you get a round stuck in the chamber, but that would happen with the automatic firearm as well. Not only would that happen with the automatic firearm, but you might run into some additional problems if something like that happens in the automatic firearm. It could potentially damage the gun if your ammunition is too high pressure. The gas system just won't be designed for it, and the gun will literally beat itself to death or even potentially blow itself up, especially if that chamber opens while those pressures are still too high. Now, with a manually operating firearm, you're the one opening that chamber, and by the time you open that chamber, the pressures in that barrel would have dropped down basically to atmospheric pressures, unless you are like Jerry Michalik speeds at cycling firearms. I know that guy can do some very impressive stuff. But whenever we were talking, we came to the conclusion that the actual mechanical nature of the firearm matters a lot less than the capacity of the firearm. Let me go ahead and talk about that for a second. If I have this bolt action rifle right here, adjust my camera a little bit. Oh God, don't you guys go nowhere, you stay right there. But if I have this bolt action firearm, and I set a couple of rounds down range, Yeah, it's a slower process than having an automatic firearm, but at the same time, if you are in a situation where you are having to use this to fight for your life and whatnot, although you are spending those rounds a little slower than a automatic firearm, would that rate of fire, that speed of fire, really make that much of a difference at the rate that you're sending lead downrange? Now, if we have something like this right here, which is automatic, of course, those rounds are going to go downrange accurately, you know, much faster, and you don't have to worry about breaking sight picture and cycling a bolt and whatnot. But if you notice, both of these rifles have 5-round magazines. I only had 3 rounds in that one apparently, but both of these rifles have 5-round magazines. So once you are out of ammo, you have to reload anyway, and that is kind of where we come to. Although this does have a slightly faster rate of fire in order to achieve accuracy, and we'll talk about cartridge sizing in a second, although that does have a faster rate of fire to achieve accuracy, something like this, even though it does have a slower rate of fire, if this had a larger magazine than your automatic firearm, then this might be the preference. Like, for example, if I was offered this right here with 5 shots, but let's say you had like a 308 Mauser that took AR-10 magazines or something like that, and you know, now you have this 20 or 30 round AR-10 magazine inside of your Mauser, even though you have to consistently, oh, I guess I can't do that, even though you have to consistently cycle your action. I'm trying to do that quickly, but this is a floor plate that won't let me do what I'm trying to do here. Let me try that again. Even if you have to consistently and quickly cycle your action, the speed of you sending lead downrange matters a lot less than you having to reload that rifle every 5 rounds or so. And I have to remember making a video about this topic not too terribly long ago about how ammunition capacity matters more than the actual functionality of the firearm. But with a manually operated system, if you have that ammunition capacity inside of that rifle, there's a lot less that can go wrong with that rifle. Like a Mauser, like a 308 Mauser that takes AR-10 mags, that would be way, way more reliable than an AR-10 if it gets like dirt and mud and whatnot on it. If you have a situation like this, or if you're swapping ammunition types and maybe your AR-10 is tuned for like 5.56, or not 5.56, 7.62 NATO ammunition, and you throw in some 308 because that's what you found, well, that rifle might not like that, but this rifle right here simply will not care. So if you have yourself a manually operated firearm, I do feel like that if you're comparing those apples to other apples, like this right here is an apples to an orange situation. If we had, saying, M1 Garand and 30-06, 2 full power rifle rounds, or 2 full power rifles out here, the M1 Garand and 30-06 has an 8-round capacity magazine. Well, this right here is a 5-round capacity magazine. Well, if this was a 308 Mauser that took AR-10 mags, and you could quickly reload, swap out your mag, put in a new one, and just cycle your bolt home, and now you're back in business, I think I'd rather take the manually operated firearm as opposed to the 8-round in-block clip M1 Garand, which is a semi-automatic firearm. Now, with the power of the cartridges, and just with the M1 Garand, anyone who's ever fired an M1 Garand knows that you can shoot them fast, but they're going to be inaccurate simply because of the recoil of 30-06. 30-06 is an absolute powerhouse of a cartridge. So in the time that it would take you to reline up your sights and pull that trigger and make another accurate shot on target, that is roughly the equivalent time that it would take somebody to cycle a manually operating bolt-action rifle. The bolt-action rifle would obviously be a little bit on the slower side, but if you have a larger magazine and a magazine that is of a better design that you can reload faster, like the M1 Garand's in-block clip system, if you know what you're doing and you're well trained with it, then you can reload that thing very fast. Most people aren't going to do that. However, with the AR-10 magazine system, I mean, a monkey could do that. Just push the button, out, in, bam, you're back in business. So the rate of fire would definitely be slower, but the firearm itself would be more reliable. M1 Garands are already extremely reliable, but they do have that exposed bolt and exposed operating rod, an exposed gas system, I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong with an M1 Granding. I have had them malfunction on me before. There's been several times where I've been out there shooting, and you know, I go to take my shot and I just hear click, and that's because the M1 Grand didn't cycle all the way. Because I mean, insert XYZ situation here, where the M1 Grand didn't cycle properly, so as a result, I gotta cycle that thing manually anyway. You wouldn't get that with something like this, something that's a manually operated firearm. And it doesn't necessarily have to be bolt action rifles. I mean, lever actions, those right there, there's a reason why they were so predominant. Well, during the time period where lever actions were like predominant, from the 1860s up until hell the 1890s, where bolt actions really started to take over, black powder was what was being used because smokeless powder hadn't really been invented yet. Well, black powder causes a lot of fouling. It's very, very dirty burning powder. Well, lever actions, because they're a manually operated system, they can just kind of force their way through that funk, and they will operate in more adverse conditions than an automatic self-loading firearm would. That's why automatic firearms didn't exist with black powder, simply because of the fouling, and that is because these manually operated firearms are simply more reliable than the automatic ones. So pros, automatic, more let down range faster. If we're rocking like full power rifle ammunition, then your rate of fire is still going to be pretty slow if you're making accurate shots. However, bolt action rifles or any kind of manually operated firearm, these right here, just more reliable. And if you have a means to add more ammunition capacity to these things, then comparing these to some other stuff that was around at the time period that would be classified as better might not always be better. Like an M1 Grand and 30-06, if Germany, you know, stuck on 20-round magazines or 30-round magazines, I know they had the trench mags, but those weren't standard issue. If they made those standard issue, then these right here would have been a very formidable force to be reckoned with. Or hell, if we want to get even simpler, look at your single shot, you know, breech loading shotguns. There's not a whole lot that can go wrong with that. It's literally just a barrel that tilts and a hammer and a firing pin and a trigger that sends that forward. There's not much that can go wrong with that. If you get yourself that, yeah, you have the ammunition capacity issue, but nothing's going to break on that. Those are pretty much indestructible. If something does break, it's going to be the trigger, the sear, or the hammer. Like, those are the only things that can break, or I guess the hinge that holds the barrel on. That might also be a potential failure area. But there's not a whole lot that can go wrong with those. Or hell, if you want even less that can go wrong, a muzzle loader. There's nothing that moves on that. You just powder, ball, explosive, you know, set charge, whether or not it's flint or whatever it is that you're using, and they'll send the round down range. So the simpler it gets, the more likely it is to not fail, I guess. Anyway, folks, let me know what you guys' thoughts are down in the comments below. And besides that, like, subscribe, share, description, bunch of links, go check those out. I'll see y'all on the next episode, and like I said, I feel like this is going to be a very controversial topic, just talking about some of the pros and cons between this, because people get so embedded in their opinions whenever it comes to their specific platform that they want. So I will see you guys on the next episode. We'll talk about intermediate caliber cartridges another time on another episode. Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett.
shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.